The meeting is now live on YouTube. Over to the Chairman of the Planning Committee, Councillor Richard Dallin.
Good afternoon and welcome to the West Northamptonshire Interim Planning Committee, South Northamptonshire area. Before we begin our proceedings, I would like to call upon members to spend a minute remembering His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who died a few days ago. So if you would mute your microphones, we will pause for 1 minute. Thank you, committee. Before we continue, I'd like just to also speak of Keith Goldie, who was the Chief Planning Officer for South Northants Council, and my colleague on the committee, Councillor John Townsend. You remember him well?
I do indeed, Mr. Chairman. He was the first planning chairman, first head of planning here, and he formed the planning committee before we even moved into the forum. He set up the planning department, and he was head of planning for over 20 years here. And certainly, in my years as chairman of this committee, he was a huge supporter. I very much relied upon him. So I was very sorry to hear that his passing. But I am pleased that I was able to put Margaret Hawkins, who's written our book about the history of South Northamptonshire, which is being published now, in touch with him. And he was able to give her a lot of information on the early years of our council. So I'm very pleased. I think we ought to pay tribute to him for all the work that he did during his years with us.
I'm very grateful. I'm sure other colleagues would share your thoughts there. So if that could be officially minuted, recording our remembering of Keith Goldie, and also, of course, the minute silence for His Royal Highness Prince Wales, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. That is part of the chairman's announcements. So we move to item 1, and apologies for absence and appointment of substitutes. Richard Woods of Democratic Services, can you tell us the news on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the previous remarks have been duly noted. I've received no apologies for absence, but I must update members that since the final meeting of South Northamptonshire Planning Committee, Councillor Carol Clark has retired from the committee and today has been replaced by Councillor David Harries. Thank you.
I'm grateful. Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, declarations of interest. I suspect that Councillor Hollowell, you might have something to say. If you could unmute your microphone, please, just to say it.
Yes, done. Success at last. Yes, Chairman, can I declare an interest in all items concerning archaeology, as I'm a member of the Northamptonshire Archaeological Society Committee?
Thank you very much indeed. Well, committee, I've already had chairman's announcements, so we move on to item 4, which is the first of our planning applications for this afternoon. This is land north of Church Lane, Bugbrook, and our first speaker is our case officer, Tom Ansell. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. What I will do now is proceed to share my screen so I can present the application to members. If you'd like to bear with me just a moment, I'll set it up. I've just been notified that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
It's now been enabled. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So just to confirm, you can see the
yes, that's
outline.
Fine.
Fantastic, yeah. Thank you. So the application before you relates to a parcel of land situated to the north of Church Lane, and which is this road here, and to the east of Hayford Road, which is this road here, and this is in the northwestern edge of the village of Bugbrook. The land is to be accessed from Hayford Road, where a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit will be relocated further north. The site is a paddock field surrounded on all sides by mature vegetation and trees. This clump of trees here are protected by an official TPO. The field contains evidence of ridge and furrow. So the plot outlined in red is a little over a hectare in size, as I said, sits to the northwest of the Five Bells Public House and to the east of Home Farm and its associated buildings. There are a number of public rights of way which run alongside the side of the site and connect into these paths here at the top, which head away from the site. The site lies outside of the settlement confines of Bugbrook. The confines line travels along the eastern and southern boundaries with the Five Bells here, and then proceeds away along the backs of this settlement here. So what we're looking at today is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access for 12 dwellings, which are for older persons. This means that they'll be age restricted to those aged 55 or over. The age restriction will be secured via a legal agreement. I'll just briefly zoom in on this indicative layout. So one thing to note is that the lighter grey is indicative of single-storey development, and the darker grey is two-storey development. As I said, indicative because this is outline, but it is useful to have a plan showing this detail. So the indicative layout does show how the development could take the form of two farmyard-style arrangements here with a street sort of connecting the two. The council has received a parameters plan which highlights the position and extent of built form and curtilage within the site. So again, if I just zoom in slightly, this shows you where built form frontages will be. The pale colour is where the extent of the residential built form and curtilage will be. And this has been quite important. This has been reached following discussions between the council, the agent and an independent landscape consultant. They were brought on board to assess the landscape visual impact of the scheme. From that, an important element has been identified, which is keeping built form away from the northern boundary of the property, of the site, to allow this to be landscaped appropriately as mitigation. So in connection with that, we have also received an indicative landscape concept plan, which shows the locations of new planting in this area here, green space retained around here, and in yellow hashes are new connectivity, so that's a pedestrian link to be provided from the southwestern edge of the site near the junction between Church Lane and Hayford Road through to the eastern side of the site, where it will link into an existing public right-of-way. Part of the proposal also includes, and I'll just zoom in quite a bit, includes the provision of an adoptable public footpath from the site's entrance down to Church Lane. So I've been onto the site, and knowing that site visits are not presently possible in terms of committee, I have taken a larger number of photographs, which I would like to just go through, albeit quite quickly. Just for context, I wanted to show you this first. So I'll obviously prompt when photograph vantage points change, but I've taken photographs from Church Lane, where these blue dots are approximately. Then I moved on to these vantage points here, which are from the Hayford Road. And then I moved on to the public footpaths around, so here and here and here. The site is here. Unfortunately, it was not outlined in red on this plan, which I regret, because it would have been helpful to have that outlined in red. But I'll move on to the photographs, and I'll go through them, say, reasonably quickly, just providing notes where possible. If people feel like they've seen enough, then please prompt me. So these first photographs are from Church Lane, from Five Bells, facing towards the site at a distance. The development would be behind these trees here, where the field is. So this is just, again, Church Lane, and looking up Church Lane. And then this is the Hayford Road Church Lane junction. This is where the footpath is proposed to go, that will link the entrance of the site down to Church Lane. And these are the protected trees that form a band at the southern end of the site. And that's Home Farm and the buildings associated with Home Farm, quite a historic complex. This is so this photograph is taken from the metal gate that's in the corner of the field, the site, looking at the trees. Not particularly helpful, actually, retrospectively. This is from the junction, just looking at the kind of the suitability of the junction that's near the access into the site, and then just a couple of photographs from around the corner, just to kind of give a context as to the approach from the open countryside. Some photographs from Hayford Road. So this is the bus, one of the bus stops. The other bus stop is there, and the site entrance is just well, that'll be visible in a further photograph. So that's where the access is proposed to be. And just photograph down towards the junction where I was just standing, and then back out into open countryside. This is a photograph of the actual site itself from where the access is approximately proposed to be. As you can see, it's just a field, as I said, with bordered all around by mature hedges and trees. Just a photograph of a collapsed tree from the bus stop looking down towards Bugbrook. And then the following photographs are from the public footpaths that run to the north of the site. So you can see approximately the track that people carved into this field, which they take. This is following an official designated path across the field. And the site is effectively behind these trees. So you're looking now towards Bugbrook from the open countryside, and the site is behind this tree barrier here, this hedgerow here. And all of these photographs are the same. So they're taken from various photographs at various vantage points to the north of the site facing it. You can see that there are wider but long distance views. This is perhaps one of the further views from the footpaths where they converge at a point towards the site. So again, the site is just behind those trees there. And then heading back towards the site along the footpath across the field, getting a bit closer. That'll be looking into the site from from the corner. You're looking towards the protected trees which front Church Lane there. And yeah, that's just to indicate the footpaths converging on a point near the site, one heading off directly north, one heading off to the northwest. And again, this is the site from a different vantage point. And then I'll just try and see if there are any others worth mentioning. Yep, so again, just the site from footpaths. Some photographs from a junction that's to the east of the site. Not many views really available here. Again, so the site's behind this barrier of trees here. And again, this is again from the east, so the site's behind here. We're sort of behind the Five Bells, around the Five Bells Public House in this location. And this is from the northwest of the site. There's a track that goes to the Grand Union Canal, which is a public right of way, and the views from there. The site is here, and it's quite well shielded by existing boundary treatments. Okay. The issues for consideration here are the principle of development and the suitability of the access, because it is an outline application with all matters reserved except for the access. It is considered, however, during the application that an acceptable layout, scale and design in this location can be achieved with regards to the site relationship with the village and nearby heritage assets. So that has been a consideration as to whether it is possible. We feel that it is possible to achieve that. A heads of terms is listed in the committee report, and this is intended to set out the elements of a Section 106 agreement necessary to mitigate the impacts of the development on local infrastructure and facilities. In terms of constraints, if I just zoom in slightly, the site adjoins the settlement confines as established by policy SS1 of the local plan part 2. So the confines, as you can see by this dotted line, do that. Bugbrook is a second category primary service village. The site contains a number of protected trees, protected by this band here. It's also adjacent to the conservation area, and it affects views into and out of this asset. There are some listed buildings within the wider environment here, and here that's St Michael's Church. In terms of updates, I can confirm that the applicant has, via the agent, agreed to the additional element in the heads of terms that was proposed in the committee updates document circulated earlier. That was reference to the lifetime standard homes, and the additional condition that we've proposed restricting the housing mix to no more than 2 bedrooms across the site, that's referred to in the committee updates document as well. So the applicant has agreed to them. Following consideration of the merits of the application, officers recommend that it is approved subject to conditions listed in the report and subject to the completion of an acceptable Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Have you had a further response from the clinical commissioning group, Tom?
I have not yet had a response from the clinical commissioning group, no.
All right. Other questions from any members of the officer at this point? Councillor Townsend.
Just quickly, I may have missed it because my telephone went off at the wrong moment. There's any photographs of the site itself? I mean, we have a lot of photographs round about, but particularly as we're, they were talking about ridge and furrow in the report. It was just interesting to see what the ridge and furrow looked like. I mean, what the setting of it is.
Of course, what I can do quickly then is just reshare my screen. What I will do is show you the photograph again I took of the site itself from the, and it's quite difficult to get a clear shot of the whole site because it's actually relatively well protected by the natural growth around the boundaries, but hopefully you can see this photograph, which is now on my screen. These photographs show the site from Hayford Road. This is from where the access into the site is supposed to be. It is proposed to be, I should say. Now, I did take photographs from the other side of the site over here. Perceiving the ridge and furrow is a little tricky from photographs taken at ground level, but if you are happy to just bear with me a moment, I know that the aerial photographs available on the council's global information system better show this. So I'll just get that up on my screen very quickly and then show you that. So aerial photograph from 2014, and you should see the evidence of it there.
There is, yes. Very good. Yeah.
And so that photograph I showed you. So this photograph is being taken from about here. And then I took photographs from about here where there is a break in the vegetation as well. But it effectively shows the same scene from a different angle, and it's difficult, as I said, to perceive this from ground level, but this is a really clear and good indication of that.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions of members? Councillor, yes, Councillor Pritchard, go to you first, please, and I'll go to Councillor Surgeson-Brook afterwards.
The entrance to this particular site, is that the electrical substation with the brick building as you look at the entrance to it?
I think it is a substation of some kind, or at least a maintenance building. When I visited, I wasn't able to hear it making any discernible noise. It was protected or as if it was attended regularly, but I wasn't able to hear it operating or anything, but it looked well maintained and in good condition. I'm not certain what the applicant's intention is in respect of whether they've already spoken to the utilities provider and ascertained that that's now redundant or can be relocated in a way that isn't going to require that building being positioned somewhere else in a more prominent location. That's something I can certainly look into if needed.
Well, we have the applicant appearing shortly, so possibly, yeah. Councillor Pritchard, you could put your question again to her. Thank you. Councillor Surgeson-Brook.
Mr. Chairman, this is actually contrary to our latest development plan. So does this sort of drive a coach and horses through it, which means that any developer could then ask for planning permission for bungalows outside a village envelope? Well, I'm actually asking the officer because he must have discussed it with the other officers.
Well, of course, and it's something that I perhaps retrospectively should have included in my presentation is that the applicant's approach to this is policy compliant. They're looking at an older person scheme. The older person scheme, age restricting it to 55 plus, does comply with policy LH6 of the local plan, which allows for sites, suitable sites that adjoin the settlement confines of larger villages such as this one, to be considered for developments that provide housing for older persons or vulnerable people. So this is being brought forward under a policy compliant scheme.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my question is, I understand the applicant is acceptable to restricting the development to 2-bedroom properties, but are there, I may have missed it, but are there any conditions proposed that would restrict extensions being added to these properties? As we're all aware, that no sooner that someone moves into a new house that they tend to put in for an application to extend.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's something that we might, I think we could put a condition on at outline stage, but even if it hadn't been put on at this stage, I believe it could be put on at reserved matters and captured then, because that's when we're looking at the layout and design and scale of the dwellings and make sure they're appropriate for their intended occupiers and use. And that's when we might want to control whether they can be extended and kept suitable for the intended occupiers and going forwards. But we could also explore putting that condition on an outline stage if it's justifiable.
Well, Councillor Johns, you might want to bear that in mind. Councillor Pritchard, do you want to ask another question, or have you just got your the yellow hand up for no good reason? You're on mute again. Can you unmute yourself and just confirm?
Yeah, I should have taken it down.
Yeah, that's all right. That's okay. Right, I can't see any other. Yes, I can. Councillor Hollowell, you're waving to me. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to pursue a number of questions, actually. First of all, I want to take Councillor Sargent Brooks' question to another stage. And also, I'd like to have some more information regarding the sustainability of the location and particularly the walking routes. So if I can pick up, first of all, on the development plan and the conformity and pick up really where Councillor Sargent...
If we could do one point by point, I think would be helpful so that we can follow it.
I'm doing it point by point. Actually.
Yes, that's excellent.
Yeah. Right. So in 9.23 on page 21 and elsewhere, you've said that this application is compliant with the development plan. But if we turn to policy R1 in the joint core strategy on pages 207 to 9, and for anyone who hasn't got a copy of it to hand, that policy sets out the spatial strategy for housing provision in West Northampton. And amongst other things, within R1, that there is a general presumption against building in the open countryside. Part G, Roman numerals 1 to 5, sets out a list of exceptions to that general presumption. So can you explain the relationship between this application and policy R1, and then perhaps go on to explain where the MPPF fits into this?
Tom?
Certainly. So if we're looking at policy R1 and the joint core strategy in isolation, finding a policy that it directly complies with is a little trickier, because policy R1 does refer to like exception sites, which mainly refer to just sites that provide deliver 100% affordable housing. However, the local plan part 2 I take to represent the council's most recent sort of policy position in respect of developments within its own district, and the joint core strategy obviously refers to it referred to the other districts. Now we're all one district, but it did refer to the other districts sort of within the wider borough as well. I would refer to policy, fundamentally I'd refer to the paragraph 77 of the MPPF, which states that planning in respect of housing policies and decisions should be responsive to local circumstances and support housing developments that reflect local needs. So if we first of all establish that it does comply with the local plan part 2, policy LH6, which that's been reviewed and assessed by the policy team in the council, and they concur with that. If we were to then consider there was a conflict with R1, I would afford weight to the fact that they have demonstrated there is a local need in the village for this sort of housing, in fact a local need perhaps in the wider area for this sort of housing, and they're proposing to deliver it with also 50% of affordable housing contributions. So that in my mind affords is afforded weight, and that weight would counterbalance any kind of harm caused by technical conflict that exists solely with R1 in isolation.
Councillor Hollowell.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I entirely take your point about LH6 and the Part 2 local plan. I'm still unsure what you've just said there about R1, and I'm looking at G. I think you will have looked at this, but Part G, number 4, it's referring there specifically to policy H3, and H3 is what we would call our old-fashioned exception sites. In other words, there should not be market housing there unless it's necessary to enable the affordable to be built. And I'm not convinced, but you may convince me, that the market housing is necessary here in order to provide the affordable.
I think.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be noted that this isn't being posited to the council as a rural exception site under H3. It is being posited to the council as an older person's housing site under LH6. So whilst if LH6 didn't exist and the policy local plan Part 2 hadn't yet been adopted, or there was a situation where we're only referring to H3, then you're correct that there would need to be justification for the market housing. It should be the bare minimum needed in order to make the development viable. But as it's not being posited under H3, it's being posited under a separate policy which has been adopted and accepted by the council, then my position is that it is complying with that adopted policy LH6 and the local plan Part 2, and therefore that the consideration of H3 isn't relevant to the decision-making process in this circumstance.
So I think what you're saying is that it complies with the Part 2 local plan, but it doesn't comply to the Part 1, to the core strategy. Is that fair?
I think I would say that if I was looking at policy, if I was looking at the joint core strategy in isolation, it would be more trickier to justify it against the policy set out in that plan. But I think LH6 and the local plan Part 2 is the starting point. I think that's required by the NPPF.
Okay, that will do. Thank you very much for that. Can I just move on then very quickly now to the location and the walking routes, because LH6 does require makes a number of requirements. For example, that a site should be there should be public transport or within 400 metres of village facilities. So the first very quick question is, do you know how far it is to, say, the medical centre?
So I've done some quick measurements, and to get from the site using the public footpaths to the village core, which is the high street where the shops are and the main facilities are, it is between 600 to 700 metres along public footpaths that don't necessarily have to go alongside roads either.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much for that. And then lastly, in 9.13, there's a lot of emphasis on connectivity with the main village by way of public rights of way. But KD12 is crossfield, and so it only has a grass surface. And KD15, where it comes out near the Five Bells, is in part at least a dark overgrown alley as it leaves Church Lane. So notwithstanding land ownership issues, do you not think that KD 15 at least ought to be surfaced and adequately lit?
I think those are fair points, and it's reasonable to it's always reasonable to look at public rights of way and the connectivity of a site. But if those public rights of way perhaps not as good as they could be, or are a little hostile at the moment for various reasons, then what we might be able to do is consider asking for contributions within the Section 106 towards the improvement of private rights of way within the village, on the basis that the development will increase the need for these to be used, and therefore it is a direct impact of the development that has been mitigated by that. So I personally feel that it could be dealt with in that way.
Okay, thank you very much for all of your answers, Mr. Ansell. very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we have 3 more councillors lined up to want to ask a question. I'll do it in the order which I've seen the hands go up. So, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, a question for the officer. If you're thinking of putting a restriction on for not extending the properties, can we leave it that people can have a conservatory on the back? Because quite often older people do like to have a conservatory to sit in rather than sitting out in the wind and on a nice sunny day. And the other thing was, what about car parking? Is there plenty of car parking on this site for these properties?
Tom?
Okay, thank you. So the first question, what we would do with the condition is not state that there would never be any permissible extensions whatsoever. We would be simply making it so that they couldn't extend under permitted development, and by increasing the number of bedrooms a property has, or do something that would substantially increase its value, it would mean that each application for an extension was considered on its own merits and would have to be submitted as an application to the council. So we would retain full control over the nature and scale of the extensions, which would enable us to provide a small conservatory to somebody who wants to benefit from that. But avoid a situation where someone is getting a 2-story extension with 2 extra bedrooms, which is unlikely to be acceptable. The second question about parking, this application is, say, outlined with access and just the principle to consider. Part of the decision-making process was looking at whether the site and the indicative layouts were capable of being policy compliant in terms of parking, and we are confident that an appropriate parking scheme which provides 2 vehicles per dwelling would be provided, or could be provided, within the space they have set aside for residential development and curtilage within the site.
Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Surgeson-Brooke, you had your hand up. It's gone down, but do you still want to ask a question again?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I was going to exactly ask what Councillor Elaine Wiltshire was saying, which is it's essential for the old people to be able to have even quite a big conservatory so that it catches the sun. So that was why I put my...
Right, okay, yeah, well, point firmly made. Councillor Harries, you had your hand up. It's gone down again. Do you want to ask a question? You're going to unmute yourself just to tell me yes or no.
Help, schoolboy error. No, sorry. Stephen's covered most of my questions. One brief one that I will ask, having got the opportunity, is relating to how we enforce the 55 and over rule for the future. I know that there's housing provision for the elderly in Bugbrook that the South Northamptonshire Council itself allowed families to use at some point. So I'm not quite sure how we would enforce in the distant future the restriction of those properties to 55s and over.
Right, so can we, Tom Ansell?
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the other examples in the village, or how they were, the mechanism we used to enforce that, or why we might have relaxed it and allowed them to not be occupied as per how they were constructed or their intended purpose. We would use with this site, we would use a Section 106 agreement, which would require the occupier to be over the age of 55, and it would permit a partner of that occupier to also live in the house. The reason why we're limiting the dwellings to 2 bedrooms, no more than 2 bedrooms, is to prevent them becoming family homes and becoming suitable for family homes. So obviously we would monitor the Section 106. There'd be a monitoring process in place within the council's planning team for compliance with that. So I'm quite confident that that mechanism will be appropriate in this instance.
All right, let's move on. Councillor Pritchard, you've got a question now.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I should have asked this question earlier, but when you actually look at the very first sentence of this particular proposal, it states that there is outline planning permission for 12 dwellings, with access being the only detailed matter for consideration at this stage. Does this mean to say that if we approve the access, that in fact it gives the inclination that we're actually going to approve this particular development?
Well, of course, we won't be, because we're an interim committee, so we're just having a one-off meeting today, but just a small point. Tom Ansell?
Yeah, so this application is being considered as proposed. granting permission, outline consent for this, grants outline consent for this and this only. What it might be perceived as doing is granting permission for an access in this location to serve a residential development. However, it doesn't mean that anyone can come along and then build anything on the site. Any future proposal on the site would have to comply with the local development, the local plan part 2, and by virtue of its siting in the open countryside, there would have to be an exceptional reason for us to allow it. So we grant outline consent for this. We're granting outline consent with the access in its position as shown, with a view of this development being brought forwards, but it does not mean that anyone can come along and develop the site in any way they wish.
It was just that if we approved the particular access on its own, that perhaps a future committee actually could look at it and say, no, we don't like this for future development.
Well, we have to consider each application on its merit on the day we're considering it, and whatever may happen in the future is for the future, not the present. But thank you for making that question and observation. Councillor Bignell, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just extend in Councillor Hollowell's discussion about accessibility. You asked the question how far it was to the medical centre. That's a very relevant question. Unfortunately, the officer actually gave us a measurement to the centre of the village, but isn't where the medical centre is. The medical centre is to the north east of the centre, so it's probably another 400, 500, 600 metres further on. So it'd be over a kilometre from this site or more to the medical centre, which I think is more relevant if we're considering these people are elderly people. Does that make a difference?
That's a fair question, and I apologise for not answering the question as put to me earlier. I still feel that the site is well relates to the village, and the public footpaths subject to improvement will be sufficient. I think one thing to bear in mind here is that this is for 55. That this development is for older persons, where the age limit is 55 plus. If we were looking at perhaps a different type of residential scheme with more care element for more elderly or vulnerable people, then it would certainly be a much more relevant point that could be a point of concern, distance on foot and distance to local medical facilities. But given the nature of the development being proposed in this instance, I'm satisfied that, notwithstanding the fact that there is a number on the distance in the adopted local plan, in terms of it saying 400 metres, I don't think that in this instance that should be something that trips the application up, because I think that it still relates well and has a good infrastructure within the village to allow people to move about on foot.
But just to come back on that, Chairman, it's actually uphill to the, it's all very relevant saying it's only twice the distance it should be, but it's also uphill to the medical centre. So you go to the centre of the village, that's kind of flat, but the rest of the village is quite a gradient to go up to it. So I think, you've been very dismissive of A, the distance, and B, the ability to get on foot or even with a wheelchair. So it's quite a trek to get to the medical centre from this site. And I think it's been dismissed out of hand, shall we say. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you at all.
Perhaps it's a shame the clinical commissioning group hasn't given its opinion as to the situation as of now. However, and in the absence of other questions, I don't see any now. So, Councillor Bignell, you remove your yellow hand. We'll now go to hear from the agent, Helen Wilkinson. Helen, are you there? Can you talk to us? I'll introduce you to the meeting. You were there.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see and hear you. So, as you probably are aware, you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. And when you've finished, I'll invite you just to pause, and then we'll invite questions from members. So when you're ready, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the Planning Committee in support of this application. The application proposes up to 12 older persons dwellings, 50% of which will be affordable in accordance with policy LH8 of the Part 2 South Northamptonshire Local Plan. Whilst the application is only presented in outline form, members will note that we have worked hard with your officers to design a scheme which not only responds positively to the surrounding landscape and character of the village, but also delivers a much needed form of development. In background to the scheme, we produced our own housing needs assessment, which shows a clear need for this form of development in the village. This is mirrored by the Council's own evidence, which shows an identified need for more purpose-built older persons accommodation in the village, and particularly highlights the lack of supply of older persons housing for those who wish to own rather than rent. The majority of the existing older persons housing stock in the district is socially rented, The same is true in Bogbrook, where the only 2 existing developments of housing for older people are social rented. These are new homes will offer older people in the village greater choice in choosing accommodation that is suitable to their needs. As part of the wider site design, although only indicative at this stage, a great deal of thought and care has been given to the approach. We have devoted large sections of the site to green, open space, which not only provides landscape benefits, but helps to deliver biodiversity improvements on the site. Indeed, the council's own ecologist confirms that there will be more than a 49% increase in habitat units delivered with this application, making this a highly sustainable development. The application has also attracted no objections from the technical consultees. The land has been identified by the parish council as suitable for development, and we are pleased that they have raised no objection to our application. We have reviewed their comments very carefully and have secured a number of benefits for local residents as part of our proposals. Overall, we believe that the proposals would be of significant benefit to the local community whilst delivering a development that is planning policy compliant. These homes will be ideal for residents in Bogbrook who wish to remain in the local area throughout retirement and will contribute positively to the community. Finally, we would like to thank your officers for their hard work on this application to date, and I would respectfully request that you approve this application in accordance with their positive recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Helen Wilkinson. We have an opportunity now for members to ask you a question. Councillor Bignell, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Helen.
Hello.
You're offering 50% of affordable housing in this application, which is very commendable. However, before us, we've only considered an outline application. So when you work it up to a full application and then you do a viability study, what assurances are we that this 50% won't be reduced?
Well, we're very happy to provide the 50% as has been shown in the outline application. I don't believe there is the intention to reduce that, but that is something that can be secured in the Section 106 agreement, I believe, as well. It can be secured via that means.
Can we? I'm not sure of that. Normally when applications go forward and you get into a viability study, we end up with our target figures being reduced, and that's quite common with application before us, and I'm not sure, and I'd refer to the officer or even Paul Settington whether we could actually secure that 50% for our Section 106. I'm not sure that's possible, but it'd be wonderful if we could.
Well, I just see the legal officer, Jamie Parsons, has put his hand up. Are you going to answer that point there, Jamie?
Chairman, through you, it's a standard practice at the outline stage to include the necessary percentage for affordable housing. But as ever, there is nothing that is the intention at this stage, but it's not possible for us to prevent the possibility of a viability argument later on. That is just simply a process that can be sought by the applicant if potentially the figures would justify such an application to the council. But we can't prevent that at this stage. We can only request what we want through policy.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bignell, do you want to ask another point or raise another point?
Well, Paul Segleton had his hand up.
Oh, well, let's hear, yes, well. Paul Segleton as the Chief Planning Officer. Have your say now, please, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, through the 106 rules to call 50% affordable, if they then end up going for a viability exercise and want to reduce that down, we can make the decision whether we want to agree to that or not. And and quite often that could then get called back to committee to make that decision, and committee can decide, well, actually, if it's below 50%, we don't want the housing because we don't think the need for that housing outweighs the loss of the affordable housing. It makes it less policy compliant. So they can always come in with a viability exercise, but we have the power to turn it down if we don't feel that the benefit we get from it out of the development and also the contribute to the local plan policy is merited.
Thank you, Chairman, for that answer.
All right, thank you. Councillor Pritchard, you've got a question for Helen Wilkinson.
It's with regards to the potential or the proposed houses. Will they be freehold or leasehold? And the reason why I ask this, who's going to be responsible for maintaining the grounds?
So at the moment, I don't have that information directly in front of me, I'm afraid. But for kind of open space, there will be provisions, I believe, within the Section 106 agreement, again, to secure the maintenance of the open space that we have shown. I believe that's how we can secure it.
Because some of these properties, actually, they may be freehold, but in fact, the actual maintenance of the grounds and everything are outsourced to a particular company.
Sure. Well, again, in relation to the public open space, the maintenance we can include within any Section 106 agreement. Does that help? Sorry, does that help? Or?
Well, we'll have to see later on, but that was just a question because quite often some house owners get to the stage where in fact there's an additional response and additional cost for actually maintaining the grounds.
All right, well, I think you've got an answer. Councillor Bignell, do you want to ask another question?
I do, Chairman, because Ken's forgotten to ask a bit. At the entrance to this site, there's a building. I believe it's either gas or water pumping station or something. What provision do you got to relocate that or accommodate that in your site plan?
So I believe it's a Cadent gas station in
gas, yeah.
And it's outside of the site boundary. So we haven't proposed to relocate. We have demonstrated that the access is safe and suitable with the substation in place, and we haven't had any response.
So your access is to the south of that building, is that what you're suggesting?
It is, yeah.
Won't that obstruct the view as you come out? Because it's right on the front of there, as we saw in the picture from the officer. I don't quite understand how that can be situated there next to the entrance and not obstruct the view to the right.
Sure. Sorry, I believe it's just sit a little bit back from the kind of the vertway, if you like. We have demonstrated that we can provide the appropriate visibility displays with the manual for streets guidance, so it doesn't actually impact on the visibility of the site entrance.
Okay, can I suggest we have Tom, if you could put a picture up so we could just see the exact position of this building in relation to the proposed entry and exit.
So from what's been said, I believe it is situated here outside the red line, and the visibility displays would be achieved within the land owned by the applicant, or in this case, land owned by the highways team. So the visibility displays would be measured from point around here. At any rate, we haven't had any objections from the highways team in respect of the access.
Right, so there's no reason to suppose there's a problem as far as you can see with access with that building still being in place.
Correct.
All right, thank you for sharing that. If you revert the screen, I think we have a question. Councillor Hollowell, your hand was up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one or two questions actually, Chair. First of all, I'm going to do them in my reverse order. The spinal road, I'm assuming that will be adopted by the Highway Authority.
Yes, it can be.
Okay, will be or can be?
Yeah.
I think that is a matter for a later stage, but it certainly can be.
Is your intention it should be or will be?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
All right, Councillor Hollowell.
The affordables, the affordable rented, we're talking about 4, I believe, aren't we?
If it's 50%, it'd be, oh sorry, rented, affordable rented. Yes, apologies. I thought you meant affordable in total. It would be 6 in total.
So they will be sold on to a registered provider.
Yes, that's my understanding. Again, that can be within the Section 106 agreement as well.
Okay, but there's nothing set yet. You've not entered into an agreement yet with anybody. Not
at the moment. Because we'd like to secure the outline permission first before we then do that. But we are very happy to have discussions about the Section 106 agreement following. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you. You've agreed to some highway improvements, in particular the extension and creation of a new footway round to your new entrance. Yeah. Yeah. Does that include street footway lighting? So that is something that we have discussed through the application and something that we can bring forward at a reserve matter stage. That's not something that we have currently, but we can bring that forward. That will do for now anyway. And you heard the questions and the answers that I received from the case officer earlier regarding the public rights of way as useful shortcuts, but in their present state not really fit for purpose. I mean, you're a lady,
you're a woman, you know the amount of murders that are being committed each year, and the assaults and harassment that women are suffering from men, admittedly. So we really do have to think, I think, here very carefully about security and safety for women and children in particular. Are you prepared to enter into some sort of an agreement, or to at least discuss with case officers and other landowners the possibility of improving KD 15 by hard surfacing it and again footway lighting to try to improve security?
Yes, I'd have to speak with our client, but we'd be very happy to have those discussions with case officers.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Ms. Wilkinson. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the absence of any other questions, I'll say thank you, Helen Wilkinson, very much for taking part in the debate. Well, the submission, however, you're the agent for this applicant. We have the debate now to follow, and we have two ward members, or ward members as in the SNC ward, but that is applicable in this case. So I'll go to Councillor Harries first of all. If you'd like to start us off on all this.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, most of the topics have been covered. I think it's fairly clear that if this were what could be termed a normal application, the policy would be such that we wouldn't allow it. I mean, it's in the open countryside. I won't rehearse all the issues that we've already covered. And so we're clearly looking at exceptions, and we seem to be looking at exception policy LH6. Again, these issues have been raised. LH6 actually refers to it being within 400 metres of facilities, which we've established it isn't. And I think the view in the officer's report that the rather nice footpaths, and it is a nice pleasant walk in the summer, would encourage people to walk or to cycle. I think that's rather optimistic of folks these days. They don't tend to do that. The concerns that I've raised about the future-proofing it for over 55s. I'm not entirely convinced about the Section 106 argument, frankly, but I can see it as a planning issue, and it's a planning tool, and that's the way that we'd have to adapt to it. But I just think that it's a very finely balanced decision, and there is no doubt that there is a need for housing for older folks, and that site has been identified by the parish council as a possibility if there are any outside the village envelope. I remain concerned and unconvinced by the primary village status, because most of the reasons for Bugbrook being a primary village relate to the schools and this GP surgery, all of which are over full, and in my view shouldn't be taken into account. And it just concerns me, and I realise this is beyond our remit for this particular application. It does concern me that the larger villages are going to be completely overdeveloped until such time as they are unsustainable, and that is a worry of mine. But I accept that in planning terms, we're looking at this development, we're balancing the damage that it will cause to the environment by putting these houses in against the provision of a service and of a need within the village. And so I reluctantly, as a local member, would come down just in favour of and supporting the recommendation of the officer, but it's a finely balanced thing. And again, I know we're only looking at this, but it worries me that once we do this, someone else will come along and say, that's an open door. This original application didn't relate to these sorts of houses at all, and developers will just look and think, well, we'll adapt our plan, and there's always a need in any village, and we'll just say we're meeting that need, and it just rides roughshod through our planning policies. So I am concerned about that. I accept, Chairman, that I've gone beyond what we should be looking at, but I think on balance, my view as a local member is marginally, let's go with it, and it does serve a need.
Thank you very much, dear Councillor Harries. If I could turn to Councillor Bignell, who's also local representative.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Harris, for starting me off with the fence. He's on one side of the fence, I'm on the other side of the fence. It is a finely balanced fence, and I unfortunately sit on the other side where I don't believe there's enough evidence to weigh in favour of it as against, as David says, for it. It's various reasons. This site has been the subject of various attempts to develop in the past. Our policies have stopped that, and these applicants have now come in with some loopholes and managed to try and fiddle one in, as I would call it. I'm not completely convinced. I don't like the site because it's not contiguous to the village. It joins on a margin of maybe, I know it only needs to just touch the existing village enclave, but it only just touch the village enclave. It's sat behind a row of trees which separates it from the village. It's an island outside of the village, which is not contiguous. This is not what policy is about. We're supposed to put things, in exception sites should join the village. This doesn't join the village. It's just an island behind a row of trees which gets a new access off a different road. I don't believe that this is sustainable. Again, we keep dismissing this 400 metres. Well, 400 metres is 400 metres. It's a kilometre to the health centre, so it doesn't accept that, and I can't possibly go with that at all. And I just believe that, I think there's David. I don't want to go over where David's been because he's absolutely right. Where once you open the door becomes wide open. The draft comes in, and we're done for. And I just think it's a weedle way of getting some form of development on a piece of land which they haven't managed to do so far. And I'm sorry, Chairman, I cannot support this application.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll turn now to other members who might like to speak. I saw Councillor Lane Wiltshire, you had, your hand is up. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is a very good idea, having houses for over 55s. And I think the locality, yes, while it's slightly outside the village confines, I think it is quite good because you are within distance of various places. If you're going to have decent footpaths to walk and also parking there as well, I think for 12 houses, I don't think there should be a problem. I really do feel that as long as the properties are well built and are of a sensible size for the over 55s, in actual fact, I think they ought to raise the age limit to this because a lot of people who are in their 40s have children late in life. So there could be the odd child on this site unless they're going to make it that there is no children allowed. It's going to be people over 55 without children. So I'm fairly well in favour of it, and I think that really in most places, and even in Brackley, we could do with something like this. Being an older person in my 70s, I do walk around, and I think walking up and down hill is good exercise for you. And in Brackley, I think we walked a kilometre the other week to the doctor's surgery to get our vaccinations.
The snow.
In the snow, and that was uphill and downhill. All over the place. So I don't think the walking distance is an issue. I think you're very lucky to have a bus stops right outside of it. So I'm actually in favour of this, and then I would be very happy to propose that we accept the recommendations as and when the time comes. Thank you.
Indeed. Yes, we're not there quite yet because other members wish to speak. Councillor Cooper, your turn next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a great shame that we're where we are at the moment and we haven't been able to come and have a site visit. I think members on the committee this afternoon would have very much benefited of a site visit to come and see exactly where this is located. My ward neighbours this ward. I've got two villages, Gayton and Kislingbury, which wrap around neighbour two corners of Bugbrook, and I know Bugbrook very, very well. It's one thing I will say, the pavements are a disgrace. So the quality of the pavements are incredibly poor. I've had a long conversation with several residents who are in the area who are on mobility scooters. and who are obviously on the pavement with their mobility scooters, and they can't use them because the pavements are in such poor condition. So I think that's very much a point. And I do feel that this plot of land where it is absolutely unsuitable for this kind of development. It's just not right that it should be in Bugbrook. And Bugbrook has taken a heck of a lot of development. So I think it's a shame that members haven't been able to come along and see, and then they would understand better where we are. So I don't support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, indeed, we would have loved to have gone on several site visits over the past year, but because of the COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to. And we're grateful to the case officer for taking an additional number of pictures so that we get something of an idea what it's about. Councillor Johns, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I do agree with Councillor Bignell's point in terms of the site. It is somewhat out on a limb. I know the site well, so without a site visit, I've been past it many times. However, I think, as always is the case, there are pros and cons with applications, and I think on balance, partly because the parish council supports this application, I am prepared to go along with the officer's recommendation. But I would like a condition, if it can be legally framed, to restrict development from further extensions. I mean, if it is older persons, I somewhat object to 55-year-olds being called older. With 2 bedrooms, that's fine. But as I say, it won't work if immediately people start tacking on extensions. So if we can take away people's right to develop their property, I think that would clinch it for me, Chairman. So it is finely balanced. My heart would like to support the objections, but my head says on balance we should support the officer's recommendation, Chairman. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll bear in mind your condition that you had in mind there, but we'll just park it for a moment. Let's go to Councillor Bignell again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The point I didn't make in my summary is that we were one of these key supply villages of the interim rural housing policy, which a few people around this table remember. And in the last 10 years, we've taken 200 plus new houses in this village, which has increased the housing stock by over 20%. And we have actually been mullered with development again and again and again. And I just feel that, fair is fair. Let's spread some of this out. That there is a need for this type of housing, but why does it have to be in Bugbrook yet again? Because we believe that we've got a school which is full, we've got a medical practice which is full, we haven't got a shop. All this stuff that's tacked around it is just rubbish. And again, we're just getting put upon.
Thank you, Councillor Hollowell.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of points to make, but can I start with the development plan argument? I still don't really buy this argument that it's in conformity with the development plan. For this application, the principal documents in the development plan are the core strategy and the local plan part 2. And this is undeniably in conformity with local plan part 2 and LH6. With the possible exception of the requirement for the 440 metres, which I'll come to in a moment. But to my mind, it's clearly not in conformity with the core strategy. And I don't think you can pick and choose and say, well, because it's in conformity with part of the development plan, then it's in conformity with the development plan. So I think that's dodgy. But even if you accepted my argument, you are still left with the NPPF, which says, if there are other material considerations, and there clearly are, and so this is why we're discussing the planning balance here and the pros and the cons. The question of the affordable rental homes and the question of viability. Now, I absolutely accept what Mr. Seckington has said, that that the committee, the planning authority, may not accept a lower figure. The trouble is, and we've had this before, what happens when the developer has already implemented and started building? it's virtually then like putting a gun at the planning authority's head, and it's very, very difficult to resist it. So I'm not saying that is in itself a reason for refusal, but it's certainly a matter for consideration, as is the question of the spinal road. Is it to be adopted or not? There is no way that I would vote for a scheme of 12 houses if the local highway authority were not to adopt it under section 38. Regarding this question of this brings us to LH6 now and the 440 metres. I estimate that the distance between the entrance to the site and the medical centre is approximately 0.5247 of a mile. In other words, it's just over half a mile. So it's not compliant actually with that part of LH6. But is it too much, or again, it's for the committee to decide whether that's relevant or not. And this is a question probably for Mr. Parsons now. Section 106. We're talking about trying to limit these 2-bedroom houses to people over 55 years. What happens if somebody, a couple in their 30s, buy one and move in, and then we find out regardless of the 106 agreement between ourselves and the developer, those people that have moved in, they're not going to be parties to that agreement. So perhaps Mr. Parsons can explain in a minute how that can be firmed up. I'll come back to you in a minute, Jamie. I note that we're losing medieval field patterns. We keep complaining about this, but we've always failed to get this written into policy documents, and we should have done. And hopefully the new council will do a better job than we have on that. My final problem, I've got a couple of pros in a moment. My final problem is this business of safety and security for women and children. I think that we must pay much more attention to that, and we must ensure that the pathways, whether they're footways beside the road or whether they're public footpaths, then they should be as secure and as safe as possible for women and children to use after dark. All of that said, I do accept the need for housing for the elderly, and I do also recognise the parish council's support for this. But on a question of balance, I think I'd probably err towards Councillor Bignell's view that this is quite a nice development. I think I probably like the development more than he does, but I am very concerned about the location of it. Thank you.
All right, let's pick up on the point you raised. If I go to the legal officer, Mr. Parsons, if you could answer what was mentioned there.
Yes, Chairman. In relation to the section 106, I think the first thing just to remind councillors of is the fact that it binds the land, not the developer, so that once units and dwellings are built out, they are still bound by that section 106 agreement. The strongest form to try to create the greatest protection possible is what I would recommend is you end up putting a charge on the land registry title whereby no transfer or no disposition, without getting into all the details, will be registered until the conveyancer has provided a certificate to say that paragraph 1 of the section 106 dated XYZ has been complied with, or the sale is in accordance with it. That part of the paragraph I make reference to would, of course, be the element that says no person under the age of 55 or their spouse, etc., will occupy the property. So in fairness, the section 106 can be very strong in terms of providing that protection. If ultimately if you like, a rogue conveyancer just sends it off and someone buys it that is under 55, then the section 106 would stand, and it would be a matter realistically of potentially at the nth degree getting an injunction to say that any resident is in breach of the 106. Fundamentally, they would obviously have their recourse to their solicitor because they should have been properly advised, etc. But there are strong means to enforce a section 106. So I wouldn't personally suggest that would be a reason to cause any doubt to doubt the requirements in terms of age restricted occupation.
Councillor Hollowell, do you want to comment?
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, admittedly, though, I think a messy business if it did happen, isn't it?
Well, it is, but that's true of any Section 106 breach, to be honest. The other thing I would say,
it's messy if you've got to actually. I mean, I don't know how this would work in practice, but you're virtually telling somebody that they've got to sell the house that they've just bought to somebody 55 or over. That's really what it would be.
Well, what you're telling them is they've been badly advised, because both if the charge is on the land registry title, of course, the Section 106 will also be registered as a local land charge. So any conveyancer should pick up on that to, to see the restrictions in relation to occupation, and should fundamentally not advise anyone that's under 55 to buy it, because they'll be in breach of it straight away.
I kind of accept that, but what I'm saying is, if a slightly dodgy conveyancer did do a quick job on it, and we ended up, or West Northampton Council ended up with that position where they've got young people living in a house intended for older people, it's fine to say, well, you want to take this up with your conveyancer, but that doesn't actually get them out of the house, does it?
Well, it's in the same way that you could turn around and say, if someone sold an affordable housing off to someone that wasn't legitimately entitled to an affordable housing occupation, it's no different from that. The way of putting the restriction on the land registry title as well creates another tier where you are seeking another professional has to in effect sign it off. But there has to be a limit to that. And
yeah, I would be watertight. I mean, you can go to about 99%. You can guarantee. It sounds like. All right. Well, thanks for that one. Now, I noticed that the applicant is still here. Now, normally we wouldn't allow you to say anything more because you've said your bit. If the committee is willing, I'm happy for Helen Wilkinson to say something if it's pertinent to what we've just discussed. I see nobody saying that you're objecting. So Helen Wilkinson, briefly, what did you want to say as the agent?
Thank you very much, Joe. I very much appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify on the adoptable road. We certainly will. I've just double checked, and we'll certainly construct it to adoptable standards, and it is very much the intention for it to be adopted. I apologise if I didn't make this clearer earlier.
Right. So it will, if this application we agree, it will be adopted. You can guarantee that.
I can't guarantee that, but that is certainly the intention.
Well, that's always the thing, isn't it? But it is the intention. All right. We'll take that.
I do apologise for not being clear.
No, all right. If you could now switch off your video as well as your microphone, I'd be grateful. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Parsons, do you want to say something more on that?
It was just a very quick one to simply say that obviously the applicant has confirmed that they're happy for it to be adopted, and that can either be included as a condition or within a Section 106 to confirm that. It then doesn't become an intention, it becomes a necessity for them to do that.
That would probably go along with what the committee is thinking, I suggest. Right. Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, very briefly. The other thing to consider, or obviously to just refresh the committee's mind to, is the fact that if it is deemed that they feel that further highway improvements, etc., would be beneficial, obviously there is the balance to be made in considering what is and isn't reasonable, etc. But it would be possible to include either a condition or within the 106 a highway improvement scheme to be agreed, so that could be included at this stage, rather than potentially having the risk of trying to include it as a condition at the reserve matter stage, when it is potentially arguable to say it should have been considered at this stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it probably does. Let's just bring in some few more councillors. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things actually I do consider it's incredibly important to provide this particular type of housing for older people. I think it's incredibly important, but I have these enormous concerns, and I'm sure my fellow councillors Hollowell and Bignell have actually mentioned with regards to how do you police ensuring that 55-year-olds actually own these properties. even though they may own them, there could be the scenario when you think of a 2-bedroom property where, you know, perhaps the daughter moves in with the children, and I'm sure there is probably no legislation or no ways that that can be actually fight against. But also I think it's incredibly important that you know, everything that lots and lots of questions that we've asked in the past actually comes down to the 106 agreement, where, you know, there seems to be I appreciate it's an outline, but at the same token I would have thought some of those questions could be answered. I think this is probably developer opportunism, and that's the way I view things. So I personally will not vote for it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elaine Wiltshire, I saw your hand next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. These sort of properties actually do go on the market very similarly to like the McCarthy Stone, Churchill. They are all for people over 55s. Yes, they're apartments, but they're all for people over the age of 55s. There's a lot of other properties elsewhere in wooden chalets and that sort of thing. They're over the age of 55s. I really do think that we are going round in circles on this one. As the legal officer has said, there are ways and means of putting covenants and things into the deeds to actually specify that these are going to be for the over 55s, and it's down to estate agents to actually sell the properties to the over 55s. Or if not, it could even be that somebody else is buying it for their parents. In this day and age when people are needing to move out of a property and want to pass it on to their son and daughter. You know, that's where the legality lies. So it will be up to the estate agents to do it, and they will get sued, and so will the solicitors if they don't behave. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Yes, thanks very much. It's a really difficult one, this, and I find myself going one way or the other as the debate has gone on. I just listened to what everyone has said. I think one thing which will be really important, and won't be up to us, but it's a good idea. I take Councillor Wiltshire's point. This is not a unique thing. I think but the design will be really important, and hopefully officers will see that we get a good design, or the new council gets a good design. I rather agree with people who say 55 is rather young. I mean, I'm now 82, so I think there's quite a lot of life in you after 60. I would have thought we could have said 60, but I mean, if that's the norm, then we have to go with that. I am incredibly sorry about the rigid and furrow, because I think that's really important, and we don't make enough of it, really, but there we are. But in the end, I suppose the two things which I look at is the parish council are for it, and that I think is, I get the feeling, I mean, the representatives here are divided. The parish council must have had a good debate. And they know this area, and I quite agree with Councillor Cooper that we should have had a site visit, because that would have been incredibly useful. But the final thing I look at and say, well, if this goes to appeal, where will we get to? And I don't see an inspector saying no. So those are my thoughts at the moment, but I haven't really finally made up my mind.
We can never anticipate an inspector. They are all individuals like we are. Let's just go to Councillor Bignell.
Yeah, sorry to keep going back in, Chair, but various things come out. Somebody mentioned developer opportunism, which I think very much sums it up to me. I mean, there's ways and means of getting around being outside the village boundary. This is a style of development I've never come across, and I don't believe it's ever come before this committee before. As the Paul or the officer, any examples of this in other areas? Because I mean, this is a complete curveball to me, that this idea of plus 55 people in houses, and I've not come across it anywhere. We haven't come across it with this committee. I just wonder if there's any experience anywhere else in the country where it's being used, as I say, as developer opportunism.
Well, Paul second, did you want to comment generally?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, generally, we have approved developments in the district, mainly in the towns, for over 55 accommodation, as Councillor Wiltshire mentioned, McCarthy and Stone and other providers such as those, and quite often they have that condition on restricting the age. But in terms of this general type of development, it is recognised in the planning practice guidance produced by the government about the need for specialist housing for older people, and it also has a specific category called age restricted general market housing, which they say is the type of housing generally for people aged 55 and over and the active elderly. It may include some shared amenities such as communal gardens, but does not include support or care services. So it's a nationally recognised need, a nationally recognised acceptable form of development to be provided in places. And we have a policy that we have adopted recently in the Local Plan Part 2 last July that allows for this type of housing to be provided in or adjacent to our villages. And this is what they're proposing. So we have a policy that allows for it. And the only thing that I can see that goes against the compliance with policy LH6 is this distance of 400 metres. And the question is whether Bugbrook itself is sustainable. We have it's classed as one of our most sustainable settlements. And what you've got to, in terms of the balancing exercise, to work out is whether the need that we have generally, as pointed out in the report and as mentioned to you, for this type of housing, which we all recognise there is a need, outweighs that bit more of a distance the person there has to travel to get to those services. And also, is harm being caused by its location here in terms of views in and out of the village? We're saying that it's not. We appointed a landscape consultant to do these views and amended the scheme accordingly so it sat within acceptable limits. And in terms of the point that's being raised about the 106 and the requirement to be over 55s, that is quite a common way to control these things. And as Mr. Parsons pointed out, it's no difference to the controls we put in an affordable housing, and we wouldn't turn down affordable housing schemes because we're worried that if somebody else buys it, because we do have powers to injunct if somebody does occupy something in contrary to the 106, and it could mean that they would have to move out and they couldn't occupy those properties. But we're putting strong requirements, 106 clauses and conditions in place to ensure that if it is approved, that it does deliver what the policy requires, that it's for age restricted, that it's below a certain size to be suitable for their needs, that it's suitable for lifetime home standards, so as the people grow and get older and can accommodate wheelchairs, etc., etc. So from my perspective as supporting the officer's recommendation, I believe it is a sound recommendation, and I'm struggling to see a strong reason to turn it down, would be my view and advice to councillors.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Can we go to Councillor Hollowell? Your hand has gone up.
I'll write a reply.
Well, just all right. Oh, Councillor Biggle, you can reply. Then I'll go to Councillor Hollowell.
Yes, I'm just saying that the officers actually reinforce my argument. Yes, I can understand them being in towns. Yes, where the services, the footpaths, and the ability to get around and be nearer things is easy. We're in a village with unsustainable distances, unsustainable footpaths, overdeveloped village. That's not the same as a town. That's the point I'm making. This is completely out of the blue and within a town, and it's totally acceptable. In the village that we've got and the disability we've got in this village in terms of amenities, it's not suitable. And he's just put concrete on my argument. It's absolutely right. Put it in a town, not a village. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Councillor Hollowell.
It's really a question for Paul. I mean, just make one brief point, and then it's a question really to Paul. I accept exactly what you said, Paul, and what Mr. Parsons said earlier. That yeah, we have got the powers to enforce these things like the age of the occupants, and I don't dispute that. But what I'm saying is that's a very messy process, and it's a shame that if we have to commit a future council to getting involved in that and all the expense of the enforcement and so on. But it may be unavoidable, so that's fine. The question I wanted to ask you, Paul, was regarding KD15, this path that comes out beside the 5 Barrels, which is presumably owned by somebody other than the applicant. And I'm thinking now in terms of Grampian condition. What would be your views on that? The idea has already been mooted that we include in the 106 the requirement to agree a scheme of highway improvements, and highway of course includes public rights of way. What would be your views on us trying to enforce or trying to persuade the applicant to arrive at a deal there to get that KD15 improved and made safer?
Yeah, I'm in favour of that, and that is a tool that we can use to seek to improve footpaths in the area to make them more usable. And it's something that we did do on Toaster South. There was a number of footpath connections that took that development back into the town, and we saw numerous improvements and contributions towards those improvements in that. So yeah, that is more than appropriate to use that mechanism.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Well, we've had an extensive debate. I don't think we've gone round in circles. I think we've covered points that needed to be covered, as the members felt. So perhaps we should bring to a conclusion and get to decide whether we are in favour or against or have no opinion. So I will have to look for somebody to put a proposal forward. Elaine Wiltshire, Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you. I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and perhaps put a covenant on to say that we have the footpaths and built up as Stephen Hollowell has raised, put into the restrictions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johns.
Oh, and Jessica, we are minded to support this, and I am prepared to second.
Yeah.
We also include wording that would restrict future development of the properties.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm seeing a nod from Paul Seckington that those points can be included. So we have this proposal then, duly seconded. We'll turn to you, Richard Woods, if you'd like to call out the names, and everybody can say for, against, or abstaining. Before we do, I'm seeing some hands waving vigorously. So we go to Councillor Surgeon Brooke first. If you could unmute your microphone, please, Councillor. Oh, no, you're still unmuted. You're still muted, I should say. Go ahead.
Our legal advisor had another very good point that we should make. I've now forgotten what it was.
Well,
can you remember? But it definitely ought to have been included.
Chairman, I'm not sure whether or not it is actually making reference to whether it was the point on the highways improvement scheme to be agreed. Is it that one? Yes. And just if I can just clarify, Chairman, if I may, that is what the resolution will be for the inclusion of the highway improvement scheme to be agreed, as opposed to specifically saying the footpaths at this stage, so that
it will include it.
Leaves the ability for there to be discussion.
Thank you.
All right.
And sorry, just to confirm again that the conditions were to include those in the update sheet as well, just as a solicitor point to clarify.
Yep, I think we've got all that. That's good. Councillor Hollowell, you want to say something too?
I still have no idea I'm going to vote on this one.
Well, you're going to have to decide soon.
I think, though, we should have a recorded vote, Chairman, if I may request one.
You may indeed request a recorded vote. Before I turn to Richard,
anyway, isn't it?
Well, yes, but yes. Anyway, let's not. That will happen anyway. Is there anybody else who wants to say something before we actually go to the vote? No, right, Rich. Yes. Oh gosh, Councillor Johns.
Only, Chairman, to remind members, if I'm sure they don't need reminding, that if we vote against, then obviously we'll have to come up with good reasons for turning it down. I haven't heard
Mr. Hollowell will
specific one.
Yeah, Mr. Hollowell's good at that.
Well, we'll see if that happens, shall we, Councillor Johns? Let's do it stage by stage. Let's not anticipate or indeed influence however we may wish to vote according to whatever may happen in the future. If we did that, we wouldn't get to do anything, would we? Let's go to a vote then. Richard Woods.
Mr. Chairman, so just to confirm, we are voting to, or the committee will be voting to accept the officer's recommendation subject to the inclusion of a highways improvement scheme and various other things owing to the 55 plus age and further extensions. Were they included in this proposal?
Yes.
Yes, all of that, yes.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Councillor Bignell.
Against.
Councillor Breeze.
Against.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Dallin.
Against.
Councillor Harries.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
Against.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
Abstain.
Councillor Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
And I'm sorry, Councillor Pritchard, I missed you.
Against.
If you give me a moment, Chair, just to tally these up.
Yeah, I haven't worked it out yet, so
7-6.
wait a minute. Well, don't anticipate.
I've written it down as it's gone.
So, Mr. Chairman, the result of the vote is as follows: 7 for, 6 against, 1 abstention.
All right, so it is carried with those conditions which were attached to it, together with the other conditions which were already added on. So I hope that is clear and the officers are clear as to where the committee wants to go. But thank you for that lengthy discussion. We go on now. We have another application to consider this afternoon, which is 7 acres, Watling Street, Paulsbury. And Mr. Peter Gittins is going to be the case officer on this occasion. Are you there, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Right, so take it away.
Great. As you say, this is at 7 acres, Watling Street, Paulsbury. Interesting site. It used to be a recreational fishery, which was approved planning permission. And it's now proposed that the site is a change of use of the site to an outdoor adventure and educational centre. And this is predominantly going to be for young people developing their education through outdoor activities. So worthwhile aim. Okay, I'll just share my screen so we can see where it is and what we have. Bear with me 2 seconds. Okay. So here's the here's our application site, edged in red. It's the landform is it slopes down towards, there's a lake, big lake on the site. The landform slopes down from the A5 to the lake and then back up again to the high ground beyond. It's fairly flat to the north of the site, and then so as it rises up to a plateau and then away again. Okay, we go to. This is the proposal. So, and I need to make this point about this clear. This is a retrospective application, so the development has already been carried out. Okay. I understand that the applicant runs another site, very similar site, for education of vulnerable young people in Northampton at Bourton Road, this site has been used temporarily because as part of the permitted development rights, general permitted development order, you can use any land for up to 28 days a year for temporary events. course, this changes when you're siting structures on there, because those are sitting on the land permanently, and each day they're on the land is a day of those 28. So it's something that requires planning permission now. So you can see from the plan that we have the access off the A5 round down to a car parking area, and then we've got some temporary style structures, kitchen, classroom, outdoor seating area, equipment store, tool store, office, classroom, kitchen and shower block. There's an outdoor kitchen here opposite the seating area, and then we've also got some temporary pod-like structures that house like glamping style pods, really, and they include a sort of a library pod, sensory room, changing room pods, etc. there for use by the kids. The use itself, there are going to be some there'll be the activities that they'll be undertaking. It'll be fishing, canoeing, bushcraft, cooking, because we've got this outdoor kitchen here. There's a temporary climbing wall on the site on a trailer when I visited, and potentially football on the flatter ground, but going forward. Just looking at the aerial photograph, as you can see, it's outside the village confines. It's in the open countryside, and it's a leisure and tourism development that essentially requires this type of location to operate. So it accords with policy EMP42A of the Part 2 local plan. And in addition to that, we have a policy INF31 of the plan, which encourages the provision of other facilities which provide education. So the nearest residential property is just to the north and west of the site, separated by a rough paddock. In terms of neighbour amenity, it's around 85 metres from this nearest property. So don't anticipate large amounts of noise from the activity. The applicant has informed me that they intend to have numbers in the region of 20 kids attending the site at any one time, but this it can 2 or 3 times a year. I'm told that this can be up to 40 children on these isolated occasions. So it sits very well in the landscape in terms of the modest development on this site. Modest operational development in terms of structures, and because of the landform, it sits fairly well and integrates into its surroundings in accordance with our general development policy, which is SS2B of the Part 2 local plan. Shall I just get some photographs? Hopefully, let me just see if we can get this up for you. That's it. Okay. Let me just...
We can see the pictures.
You see the photographs. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Chair. I sometimes struggle with the technology. Okay, so this is Adventures for You, is the company itself. So I'll just quickly whiz through the photographs so you get a good feel for what's going on the land. We have the lake there, which has been significantly improved by the operator, in terms of landscaping and some aeration to the lake. Let's have a look. We have the outdoor seating area, gravelled outdoor seating area. Another view from the seating area to the office and storage facilities and the shower area down there. There's the outdoor kitchen arrangement inside. Toilet on the site, which is a composter type toilet. these are the glamping style pods, I suppose you say, but they're not going. There's no overnight stays are proposed here. It's purely for these various activities: library pods, sensory pod, changing room pods, etc. A view from the other side of the lake, you can see how the land goes down. It's down from the A5. So this is the A5 side looking across the lake, and then it goes back up again towards those glamping style pods, which sit behind the first row of trees, and then the land rises up again afterwards. Just a brief look at the access arrangements which were approved as part of the previous commercial fishery here. We have no objections with it being the A5 trunk road. We have no objections from Highways England over the use of this access. We anticipate that the children will be attending mostly by minibus rather than by private motor car. I think that's just about it, Chair. Just wanted to point out that I would. It's within the new use class F, which incorporates the D uses now under the change legislation, and I propose just to restrict the use of the site to just what is being proposed. That's the Outdoor Adventure and Educational Activities Centre, and for no other use, no other purpose whatsoever, including any purpose within use class F, which should be quite wide ranging, just to make sure we know exactly what we're getting here. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you could revert your screen, please. And as you do so, I will ask any member wish to ask a question of the officer. Councillor Bignell.
Yes, Chairman, just a quick question. You said we're going to restrict it back in. Does that mean that they couldn't use it as a fishing venue in the future again, as they do currently, or a commercial fishing venue? If this was unsuccessful, could they then revert to a fishing venue without a change of uses?
No. The current application would be the change of use of the site. So if you did wish to revert back to that, you could that permission's then gone because it's superseded by this permission. So you couldn't revert it back to a fishing lake without another planning application, even though it would be potentially within the same use class. We're going to restrict that just to this use. So simple answer is yes, you would need another application, and you couldn't.
And the supplementary, I guess, is that you say there's no overnight stay envisaged at the moment. Is that conditioned out? I mean, could they again move forward and say, oh well, I want to have overnight accommodation? Would they need to apply again for that? Would they?
No, I think is the simple answer there. I haven't proposed a condition relating to that to say overnight stays, to say no overnight stays. I think within the description of the application, they could do that if they wished. I didn't feel it was wholly necessary to restrict the overnight stays, given that the issue wouldn't potentially cause any great nuisance. So, you know, if they did want to introduce any element of a camp over, perhaps, then I thought that was perhaps a reasonable thing to do, whilst it's not generally the norm.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Johns, a question.
Well, we already picked up on the overnight stay question. The only other one I had, it might seem a minor one, but were we thinking of any restrictions on outdoor fires, the lighting of outdoor fires?
Outdoor fires are not necessarily planning condition. Outdoor fires are something that's controlled by environmental health and separate legislation, pollution control. So no, in terms of this, the controls on this application, conditions need to be planning related and not controlled by other means.
All right, Councillor Townsend, your question.
This is no overnight stay. Security. I mean, those little pods and such like. Is there not someone going to want to go and say, well, we need someone living there because we've got various investments of this, that, and the other. I just wonder. I mean, when all the local youths appear and want to make use of them in the middle of the night, was there any question of security?
It's a good question, Councillor Townsend. I'm not aware of any security that's going to be in place there in terms of, but let's say CCTV could be introduced, but by the operator. Certainly, there's no one proposed. There's no residential accommodation proposed for the site. So sort of security, there'll be no one living there, and at night it will be vacant.
Well, maybe it's a question you could put to the applicant. We'll have him before us shortly. Councillor Lane Wiltshire.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I don't notice any first aid or safety equipment for anybody that falls in the lake or anything like that. Is there one? That sort of thing? Defib, a first aid tent, a buoys and things?
Yeah, I think these are operational matters, really. Not something that I have will have any particular control over in terms of the planning application. Again, perhaps a question for the operator.
All right, we'll park that one if we may, Councillor Wiltshire. The other half, Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, a question follow on from the question about security. I do wonder whether, in fact, there is any provision to prevent unlawful incursions onto the site during the times when it's not occupied. Are we certainly going to find ourselves in an encampment of 50 caravans there? And is there any provision that can be made to try and at least discourage it?
I think the access is secure there. There's a gated access. It's going to stop vehicles getting onto the site. Did you want me to reshare my screen and have a look at the access?
Well, yes, would you do so, just so it's clear to us all?
Yes, I shall do that. Share screen. Let's have a look at these. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Yes, good.
We can't see the gate, but we can see.
I'm just getting into that. I think I'm showing the gate arrangement. There we have it. So we can see a gated post and rail fence along the boundary, and then this gated access behind the black car.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Right. So, any other? Yeah, Councillor Harries.
Yes, thank you. It's a retrospective application. It looks from the report as if it's retrospective because they've put structures on site. They haven't actually done any activities that we can judge the reaction by, presumably. Then,
yeah, I think there haven't been some activities on the site, Councillor Harris. There have been some children attending. Yes.
So they have done something. So yes. Presumably, if folks really disliked it, we'd have had some sort of reaction to it by now. How long have they been using it, may I ask?
I think around the 12-month mark. I'm not certainly the process has been running a little while. They entered into a pre-app with the council, and then a full planning application. With the lockdown, things have drifted a little on the application itself. So there has been some activity for quite some months.
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chairman. Richard has locked me out on the video.
Yes, Councillor Barnes, just to joining us in due course. Is there can you resolve that issue for us, Richard?
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Barnes is not participating in the meeting until she speaks on the item, the video would have to be closed.
Indeed, right. Okay. As long as she can speak when I call upon her shortly. Thank you. All right, well, let's continue, if we may, with the applicant, because I think some questions perhaps already been asked to the officer, which perhaps the applicant could answer better. But Kurt Perryman, are you there? Mr. Perryman? Can I see? Yes, I can see you. Good afternoon. Right, now you're on vision and we can hear you shortly. You have 3 minutes in which to speak, and then afterwards any member can ask you a question. So go ahead if you're ready.
Lovely, thank you. Hopefully I'll be able to answer some of the questions the councillors have rightly been asking. But first of all, I'd like to say about what we do. We look after young people. We try to educate them through outdoor activities, climbing, canoeing, kayaking, a number of those activities there. We feel as if education is about the outdoors, but it's also linking into any sport. We can link in any activity to any education. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, let's say basketball. How many hoops have you got today? I've got 5 hoops. And out of 10, well, what percentage would that be? So we link that sort of thing into all of the activities we do, and we can link in science, history, geography, and many other things as well. So that's what we do as an education centre. We've got another one in Malton, at which I'm at that base at the moment, and we've been there practicing for 10 years and doing very well with, we work with the local schools, we work with the county council, we work with the university, we try and do it where it's all focused around education. A couple of questions that came up is that staffing. First of all my staff have national governing body qualifications, and that will be through canoeing would be the BCU, climbing with the MLTE, bushcraft has its own. So there's lots of different activities that we do that the staff members are qualified in those areas. Going on to one of the councillors asking, all staff members are first aid trained. Every single person is a staff member is first aid trained. We have a DFib on site. We have a first aid facility on site. While I go on to it as well, security, which another councillor was asking a few minutes ago, we have cameras on site already. The cameras that are on site are through to my phone and through to my computer, so I can view them at any time. So it sets up an alarm to me. If anybody goes on site, I can view that straight away from my phone or my computer, and then we can deal with any issues that we've gone on. We feel as if we've really stepped up on security as well with the site. I think in the past there has been numerous times when there has been problems on site. So hopefully we've done that. With regard to fires, yes, we do bushcraft, and we do show people how to cook. We find nowadays young people are, the healthy living is sort of gone out the window. So although we're in the real world, we are showing young people how to educate themselves through really good cooking themselves. We're also approved by something called the Adventures Activity Licensing Authority, which is similar to Ofsted, and we have to be governed by those. So they come and check to make sure we've got all staff members in place that are qualified, that are DBS, that have the right policies, procedures, risk assessments, and we have to follow their rules. We're also, which I'll just give you a quick, see that, this is a quite quick licensing that we hold at present, that we adhere to, and we also work with the learning outside the classroom badging, which is working with schools, making sure we're delivering it correctly, and we're supporting the schools in what we do through education. With the environment, we've planted over 1,000 trees on site since we've taken over, and it's very much about the environment. It's very much about showing the young people about picking up rubbish, looking after environment. We've got some beautiful birds on site. We've got some awesome, absolutely gorgeous red kites, some buzzards, and we're showing the young people about these and involving them in it. We've got 2 beautiful kingfishers, absolutely stunning birds they are. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the local community. We are, like in Malton, we work with the parish council, and we deliver out, we've got a mobile climbing wall, and we deliver that into our council, into our schools, so that we can show people, encourage them about the climbing side of it, the healthy, keeping fit, and encourage them through that. One last thing that I just want to talk about is that the site in the past has been very, been used for all sorts of things. When we got there, loads of people were dumping stuff there. The gate was open. Unfortunately, there was a lot of drugs and things that was going on there, drinking beer. And we've stopped all that. In the last 12 months, we have stopped all that. Now, just over 12 months, we've been using the site, as one of the councillors has said. The reason why we're doing it, and hands up, it was because of COVID and not being able to have so many people around. So for the last 12 months, we have been using the site to do all these things. Nobody even knows we've been down there, to be honest with you. So hopefully we'll be doing it properly, and I promise you we are doing it properly, and we will do it properly. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I want to make it right.
I'll just stop you there. You've just gone over slightly the 3 minutes, so sticking to you talk about security. Is this 24-hour cover?
Absolutely. So we have cameras on site 24 hours that are monitored by my, as I said, by my phone. It comes up with a siren as well with regard to, on my phone, if somebody's walking down there, I can view the cameras. Now, when I've got staff members down there, it is going off and I know staff members are down there. But the rest of the time, I can view them 24/7 a day.
Are you woken up much at night then when the phone rings?
No, I'm not at all, really. It doesn't ring, it just sends me a buzzer onto my phone.
Right.
There is a public footpath that runs through it, so anybody can go through there. And generally, people are lovely, really, really nice people. But it does siren off to me. I have a quick look, see what they're doing, what's going on. No problems. I don't need to go there.
All right, well, thank you. Stay put, if you will. Other members of the committee may wish to ask you a question. Who would like to ask a question? Or maybe Mr. Perryman's answered your questions. Yeah, Councillor Sturgeson-Brooks.
Mr. Tobin, you sound very, very dedicated and you're doing a marvellous job.
Thank you.
Tell me, are you also a charity?
Yes, so we've got two businesses that run together. One is a community interest company. That's the way that we can get funding for working with young people. But we're also a private organisation as well, and we can tap into two sides of funding, and that's the best way of doing it. And I think we haven't gone down the charitable road because that restricts us a lot. But we've got 20 staff members in total, 5 of which have come up through the ranks as young people. So we want to continue that down at 7 Acres as well and use young people in the area to support them and get them full-time jobs with online training as well, with all the training that we do with them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Johns.
Yes, just one question, and Mr. Perryman, I think I'd be right in saying you've got quite a lot of experience of this type of work.
I have, yeah, I love it. I absolutely adore it. I work for the County Council over at a place called Grendon for 20 years. I worked in America at a Jewish camp in America for a number of years, working with young people that have been disadvantaged. It's my passion. I'm severely dyslexic. I've got a wonderful wife that's a psychologist. She does all the paperwork for me. But I understand how hard it is for young people, but I absolutely love it. I'm here to help people in the community. I love what I do and I want it to continue.
Councillor Johnson, do you want to ask a question? Or?
No, I've asked my question.
That was your question, right? Okay.
It was just the name Kurt gave me memories of my service with the youth service in Northamptonshire. I haven't seen Mr. Perryman or spoken to him for at least 20 years, but I thought he was an experienced person.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. No reuniting of contacts there. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, may I say, it's very commendable indeed what you've actually achieved. One of the concerns I have is that knowing this particular road very well indeed, incredibly fast past the dip and up the other side. Do you anticipate more traffic and compared to what actually the use was when it was fishery?
Yeah, sure. No, it should be less traffic. What we tend to do, we've got a number of minibuses and things. So we go to the schools, we collect them and we bring them back to the site. So in theory, it should be less in theory. With regard to the road, it was a little bit of a concern of mine to start with, but just to reassure people that all the young people are not left to go and do whatever they want. That's very, very important. They're all in groups and we have qualified members of staff with them 24/7. So anytime they come down to on site, they've always got members of staff with them that are controlling that. So, we're not going to get them up in the road. I have a duty to make sure that the health and safety is kept, and I couldn't live myself if I did something wrong. So it is a busy road, but we have put everything in place to make sure that our other site in Moulton, we've been running for 10 years, and we've got a very busy road outside there as well. Probably not as busy as the A5, but we don't have any problems.
Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any other questions of members? Yes, Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, can you tell me the age range of the children that you are bringing to the site?
Yeah, good question. Most of the young people that we'll be working with are from 5 to 16. Now that might change slightly if we've got older young people, as we call it. So that could change up to sort of 18. And sometimes we'll have adult groups, maybe with special needs, things like that, that we will come and do activities with. But the majority will be from 5 years of age to 16, 17 years of age.
And another one, Chairman, if I may. What would be the maximum number of children on site at any one time in what you might call normal times?
Yeah, so normal times, we're probably talking about 15 young people at a time, just because we keep ratio numbers low and we feel it's about education, it's not about other things. Now that might go up, depending on if we have a couple of classes in, but generally we're having no more than 15 young people on site. At the moment, we're probably having less than that in about 10 maximum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chair.
All right, Councillor Pritchard, have you another point to raise with him? No, we can't hear you, Councillor Pritchard, I'm afraid. No, we still can't hear you. Do you want to say anything? If you do, put your hand.
Sorry, Chair, I forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, right. Well, that's all it is. Okay. Right. Well, I can't see anybody else want to ask a question. So, Mr. Perryman, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. If we will continue our discussion. If you'd like to shut off your video, and you have indeed, and your microphone, I'm obliged. Now we have the ward member, Councillor Sandra Barnes, next. So, yes, I can see her. So, Councillor Barnes, please go ahead. When you unmute your microphone. We can't hear you at the moment, I'm afraid.
Right, there we are, yes.
Yeah, go on.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I agree that this would have been helpful if you'd had a site visit. I do have concerns. I think it's an admirable scheme, but I do have some concerns. Firstly, it is so close to the A5, and I don't care what highways say, the access in and out of that is extremely dangerous. I think the security with the fence is minimal. We know we've had trouble there before. We've had one dead body. I think it was a tramp a couple of years ago. But if you've seen the fence, anybody can get over there without any trouble. So I think that should be looked at. The police have problems, have suggested proper locks on containers where they're going to secure things. So I think that's very important. Now, I'm extremely disappointed that these activities have started for the last 12 months without planning permission, which I think is regrettable. There's no indication, as far as I can see, how many days a week these activities are going to take place. I have not heard an answer to that. We don't know whether it's 7 days a week, whether it's 9 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the evening or whatever. We've had no indication whatsoever. I have a concern, and I thought the case officer was going to do something about amplified music, because I do think that's very important. We've had noise issues from there before. And although he says there is one house and it is quite close, and she has a most magnificent garden. So sitting in that garden on a summer evening, if there's a lot of noise, won't be a very pleasant experience for her. So I would ask you to think carefully about this. On the one hand, I agree it's a good scheme. Whether this site is the perfect site for it, I do not know. Access onto the A5 is a real problem. Councillor Pritchard drives down there the same as I do, and that is the place where we do have accidents. We have had accidents and we've had near misses, because you've got to, you go down the slope, so you've got to come up to get out, and with a minibus you've got to, I know the drivers are good, but you've got to time it very carefully to get across the A5 when the traffic is going in excess of 60 miles an hour. So I think you need to think about, if I may ask you, we need to know what are the hours of operation. We need to know about no amplified music. I do have a concern about fires, and they need to get some proper advice about that. They have got archery boards up there at the moment which haven't been mentioned, and I would just like to have clarification from Mr. Gittins, if he may, on 9.3. And this, apparently it says, and this is considered to complement the existing tourism service. Well, how the hell can this add to tourism? These are children who need to get out of school for various reasons. I can see no connection whatsoever with tourism. I can see a connection with well-being. I can see a connection with good health, but I cannot see any connection with tourism whatsoever. So I would like, Chairman, if I may, to have an answer from that. The parish council have supported it. The next door neighbour is extremely upset about it. She had huge problems in the past. She's very fearful of the future. She lives on her own. And I think the noise issues could be looked into very carefully. So I leave it there, if I may.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnes. Well, Mr. Giddins, 3 points were raised there, so can we go through them? Councillor Barnes asked about the hours of operation, the question of the amplified music, and the comment about tourism. Perhaps you could take them in that order, please.
Yes, okay. So the comment about tourism, I know that the applicant suggesting that it's predominantly for vulnerable young people developing their education, but not exclusively. It's not looking to restrict it just to that. Okay, so it's possible that it could take a booking from someone for some activity.
A loose interpretation of the word tourism, one might suggest.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, if you're visiting somewhere, yeah, it's not a residential.
Excuse me, Chair, but you're not likely to suddenly drive up the A5 and think you'll heave over the fence if it's not open, or even it is open, because you're a tourist. Come on, I mean, that's really... Well,
no,
I've got no words to say, really.
It would have to be a booking of some sort.
All right, well, you've given an answer to that. What about the question of the how many hours of operation?
And how many days?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, right, okay.
I've not imposed any restriction on the hours of operation here, or the days. That would have to be some reason to do that. The previous use was as a recreational fishery with no such restriction on it, and night fishing would have occurred. It's very limited use, very limited potential for noise and disturbance in terms of the neighbour. In fact, I think given what we've heard from Mr. Perryman, I think it'll be a much improved in terms of the management of the site and the potential for nuisance. So I didn't feel that sort of a restriction was necessary.
What about
in the same way that I didn't condition the overnight stays, because it has to be, you know, going to be some harm resulting from that. However, in terms of the third point about amplified music, okay, that could introduce some nuisance to a neighbour, even distance from the site. And I've contacted Mr. Perryman about this, and I understand that they never use amplified music on the site. That's not something that they do. Doesn't fit with the ethos there. But nonetheless, Mr. Perryman, the applicant will have no objection to such a condition going on in terms of the restriction of amplified music if the committee so wish.
All right.
That's not in terms of a volume. That's yes or no to amplified music.
Yeah, point taken. Okay, well, thank you very much. We may come back to you, but let's go to Councillor Bignell next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's a question I perhaps should have asked of the applicant. But why are we in this situation? Why did Mr. Perriman build all this up, then come to us a year later or whatever later to actually put an application in? And perhaps the officer could enlighten me why we've got where we are. It seems a bit roundabout wrong somehow.
Yes, I mean, no doubt about it. It is a breach of planning control. There are structures on the site that need planning permission, so we have a breach. It isn't a criminal offence. It's a breach of planning control. It only becomes a criminal offence when you ignore an enforcement notice. So it's in terms of how it's come about. I think it's partially due to the starting off as to test the water in terms of a temporary use of the land under the general permitted development order, and it's gone further than that. And I think the processes have taken a little time. The applicants approached us first with a pre-application inquiry, which for one reason or another, an officer absence, took a little while to get through. This is in the lockdown as well. Site visits were needed. That's took a while to get a response. A favourable response, though, was received by the applicant. And then again, the planning application submitted during the lockdown it's taken a little while, and the applicant has pressed on at his own risk.
So has he not ceased operation pending the outcome of this application?
No, but nor is he required to.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor Johns.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can see where people are coming from in terms of the access off the A5. I mean, many of us know this, the site, and it does have potential for issues around the access. However, I can't see we can object, given that there's no objections from the Highways Authority, Highways England. I think it would, although I'm sure the applicant doesn't want to use amplified music, we could certainly put that condition on it, which would at least help to reassure the near neighbour. Whether it's worth giving permission for a period of years to assess how this site fits into neighbours and the general scene, I don't know. What I do know is that this type of activity is very much needed, and it would be a useful addition for educational purposes in this part of our authority. And there is, it seems, a track record from the applicant for running similar sites. I don't envisage it being overrun with young people, because the whole ethos and the sort of business model appears to be quite small groups of fairly young children and young people. So, but as I say, I mean, I wouldn't object to perhaps putting a condition about noise, and I suppose, depending on what the members feel and advice from officers, we could perhaps consider giving permission for a period of, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, just to see how well the operation runs. But as you say, it sounds to me potentially a lot better solution for this site than the previous fishing model. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, let's get an answer from Paul Seckington on whether we could, if we were minded, grant permission subject to a review after a couple of years or 3 years. Paul, is that a feasible idea?
That is a feasible idea, and that we have used in the past when somebody's proposing permission on a bit of land that hasn't been tested before and concerned about the impacts. What I would say in response is we need to be sure that there is potentially going to be harm for us to be testing it here. There's a use of land that's already taken place in the past in terms of fishery that was unrestricted, and then they have used it temporarily for their current use before then they started putting structures on the land. I mean, if members were that concerned, then I wouldn't want you to sort of turn around and refuse the application, because I wouldn't know what grounds there would be. But as a second option, a temporary permission for, say, 3 years or more may be a suitable alternative to go down. But my initial inclination is to make it a permanent permission, given the goodness of the proposal and the benefits that are to be had. And so also support that condition on noise amplification.
Yeah. All right. Well, indeed. Councillor Surgeson Brooke.
Mr. Chairman, our officer was rather vague as to when the first pre-application was put in. From the point of how long it is taking SNC to do anything, I would be very interested to hear, and it may be one of the reasons why the applicant went ahead, because he just couldn't wait that long. So could you please ask him?
Do we know when the pre-app went in? Give us a date.
Yes, just bear with me, and I'll just get the details in front of me. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry, I've just got the details of the fishery at the moment, and not the for the public report. Just bear with me, and I'll if I can get that through on the links.
Chairman, perhaps while he's just looking at that, it is perhaps worth reiterating the point that the retrospective application is not a material consideration in determining this, because as you well appreciate, the planning system is one of regulatory, so they're looking to regularise the situation that exists now. So I'm not sure that it is actually that relevant in terms of considering this application.
I think it's more for information in a way. That point taken. Thank you for that, Mr. Parsons. Have you found the answer there, Mr. Gittins?
I'm sorry, I think it's 2019, but I haven't got the exact filing.
So this is before the COVID saga started. So 2 years ago.
Does the pre-act reference give us a clue at all? P2020-0040.
Yeah, that's a point. Does that indicate 2020? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. As I say, I'm just struggling to find the relevant file at the moment. Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Surgeson-Brooke, do you want to come back? I mean, we see a little vague answer here.
Well, I'll make no comment, but I don't think we come out of it very well.
Well, you kind of have made a comment, but be that as it may. And Councillor Bignell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The applicant made reference to a public footpath going across the site, or a footpath going, I mean, I may have missed it in the officer's presentation, but where does that go and where does that leave the site in terms of security? That was,
yes,
it didn't go together for me.
Yes, I can certainly show you that. I'll just need to.
I'm surprised Mr. Hollowell didn't say something about it.
I just need to share my screen again, and I can show you the route of the path.
If that dissects the site,
yes, it does.
Strange. With children running around and all such things going on, I can't.
All right, let's see if we can see it on the screen.
Okay, so let me. There we have it. Can you see that, Chair?
Goes straight across the middle.
Yes. Can you see the dotted line there? That runs across RU22.
Which is
and how does that go on, Councillor Bignell?
Sorry, go on. You go on, Chair.
No, yeah, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, a public footpath is what it is. It's a public footpath accessible to any member of the public, and with children and that operating there, I don't quite understand how they can work together. I would you want to have? I don't know. It's just we talk about the security of the site and it not being accessible. Then there's a public footpath going through it. Could Councillor Hollowell help me on that, please?
Well, there's an invitation. Councillor Hollowell, would you like to comment on a footpath? If you could revert.
Yes, I'd love to. Well, it's very simple. It's a 6 foot wide public footpath through the site, which must be left unimpeded at all times. So yes, the public have got access to that site. There's nothing you can do about it, really.
Well, I suppose you could always reroute the footpath, but
yeah, you could try that one. You got. I mean, the problem with a diversion is it would have to be a Highways Act one because the development's already taken place. Apparently, you've got to find an alternative route, and if you want to take it out of your site, it means you've got to get another landowner to accept the diverted route. So that's not a straightforward thing, and that really couldn't be part of the planning process. That's the point of it.
Mr. Gittins, did you take this into account when you looked at this application, this issue of the footpath?
Yes, I'm aware of the footpath that runs through the site, and indeed the applicant has pointed it out to me up on the site visit.
But you being aware of it is one thing, but did you take it into account in coming to your conclusion as to whether it was a relevant factor in any way?
I don't think it's referenced in the report.
No, so but do you think maybe you should have?
I don't have any control over this. The footpath is it's a public footpath. It does cross. It does cross the site. It's a legal right of way. It needs to be maintained.
It's just a secure area with children playing and things, and you have a public footpath through the middle of it. Am I missing a point? It seemed to go together with me, to be honest. If I wanted my children going to a thing, I wouldn't want a public footpath into the middle of an adventure playground, to be honest.
But Ian Paul, second, have you got an opinion on this one as the Chief Planning Officer?
I do, and maybe it's a good time for Peter to stop sharing his screen.
Yes, if you could, yes.
Thank you, yes.
it's a relevant point to raise in the general usage of the site, that you're concerned about how it actually operates safely with this footpath going through it, with the people that will be using the site. However, there's not really a planning reason that we could use to turn it down. This is an operational matter for the operator to deal with, not really a matter for the committee to determine the application on. And in terms of the question that Councillor Sedgerson Brooke, I think, was the person who asked it, about the timeframes of the pre-application discussion, we received it in February 2020, and we issued it in June 2020. So just at the start of the original lockdown, and there were questions to and fro between the case officer and the applicant about further information to understand what it was. So a bit longer than we'd normally would. There were questions asked, and we did give a response within 4 months, and then the application subsequently came in after that.
Okay, well that's helpful there. Councillor Semiotis.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that an awful lot of children's activities do take place on public recreation grounds. So what's the difference with public walking on a recreation ground or walking on a footpath, which perhaps the last time somebody trod on it was Boudica?
Well, who knows? Thank you for that observation. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll come back on that. I think this is a really, really worthy project. And as you know, so many members have already said that this is absolutely right. And this is very, very, very much what children need, and what we need to be seeing that we are providing for children, especially for their well-being and their mental health. But I agree with what Councillor Semiotis has said, but I just do have slight concerns. I think it is an incredible shame that there is a public footpath going through the middle of it. But I think it's very much up to those that are running the sessions there to ensure the safety of the children. And we see this time and time again, and children are kept safe. So I think it's very much for them to ensure the safety of the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the applicant did refer to the fact that they're all safety trained and first aid and all of that. So he did, in a sense, answer that point. But thank you. Councillor Townsend.
It's a really worthy application. What's been going on before, it doesn't bear comparison. These children are being supervised, as we understand, all the time, and as somebody said, a lot of this stuff takes place on public parks and such like. So I just think it's a really wonderful thing. I do agree about the about not having music as a sort of safety net. But otherwise, I just let the thing go through, and hope and I'm certain it will be a great success.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened carefully to all the discussions. I think we can get a little bit wrapped up in child security in this case. And we're always getting to the stage where we're recommending that all children should be trained in cages to keep them safe. I don't think we can really ask that these sort of facilities have escape-proof fences around them with armed guards at strategic intervals. So I do, as I said, regard the footpath as being something of I could say a byway, I suppose. All in all, I think this is an excellent scheme, and I will be happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Second.
So yes, Councillor Townsend, thank you. I did see Councillor John's hand up. I don't know whether you wanted to say something at this point.
I was only going to add with the proviso of no amplified sound.
Yes, indeed. I think that's a generally agreed that should be a condition, and the officer has said he's happy with that. Right, so we have that proposal there from Councillor Paul Wiltshire, seconded by Councillor Townsend, to accept the recommendation with that additional condition to do with amplified music. If the committee is so moved, we will go to a vote now. In that case, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to confirm, then, the committee will be voting to accept the recommendations subject to the additional condition with regards to restrictions on amplified music. If I go through the roll, Councillor Bignell.
For.
Councillor Breeze.
For.
Councillor Budden.
For.
Councillor Dowling.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Harries.
For.
Councillor Hollowell.
For.
Councillor Johns.
For.
Councillor Pritchard.
For.
Councillor Samiotis.
For.
Councillor Surgison Brook.
For.
Councillor Townsend.
For.
Councillor Wiltshire. Elaine Wiltshire.
For.
Councillor Paul Wiltshire.
For.
That is carried unanimously, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed. So, and that is it. In the absence of any urgent business, that concludes this Interim Planning Committee, the big mouthful, West Northamptonshire Interim Planning Committee for the South Northamptonshire area. So I thank all the councillors who've taken part, and indeed over the years when we were South Northamptonshire Council, which we were until 2 weeks ago. We wish everybody well. We have the forthcoming election, and there will be a new planning committee which will drop the word interim, but we'll still have a South Northamptonshire area bit to it. So we wish everybody well for the future. But meantime, thank you very much indeed. This meeting closes at 20 minutes to 5. Good